So this bit here then, basic requirements for basic protection. All equipment shall comply with the provisions of basic protection described in 416 and 417 where appropriate. So let's go and have a look at these particular sections here. So basic protection 416, as it says on here, provisions of basic protection provide protection under normal conditions and are applied where specified as part of the chosen protective measure. First one, basic insulation. Don't have to worry about it too much because the manufacturers tend to put it on. We just have to make sure we keep it intact whilst it's being installed and after being installed. So live parts shall be completely covered with insulation, which can only be removed by destruction. For equipment, the insulation shall comply with relevant product standards. In other words, the equipment is made by the manufacturer and the manufacturer follows the appropriate British standard for that piece of equipment. So we don't have to worry, we just have to make sure whenever we specify something or install something, it meets us the appropriate British standard. Just in case you didn't know, paints, varnish and lacquer are not considered good insulation, so we don't use it. Barriers and enclosures, this one hopefully you will be familiar with because this is where it brings in the IP ratings. Remember, IP ratings are linked to Appendix 5 of this book, and Appendix 5 talks about the classifications and coding, and which has a link to these two on here. Well, I say these two, these are the only two that are not listed. So you have IPXXB and IP2X. Now these are a British standard finger, which is about the size of your little finger. So that is a British standard finger. And like I say, this is a jointed finger and it's IP2X. So what this is basically saying is that all enclosures, when accessible, shouldn't have an opening larger than IPXXB or IP2X, 2 being the second letter out from the alphabet, hence IPXXB, which are both fingers, and it shouldn't have an opening larger than that, and you shouldn't be able to touch live parts from within. So there is an exemption on some things, such as certain lamp holders, that you don't need to worry about it, but that gets spoken about later. And it's unintentional contact, so not deliberate. So if someone deliberately wants to get into something, there's not much you can do about it, to be quite honest. So on an enclosure, just looking at that, that would be the front, sides, back and bottom of an enclosure must be IPXXB or IP2X, which is, like I say, about the size of your little finger. The top of the distribution board or top of the enclosure or whatever it happens to be has to be IPXXD or IP4X if accessible, and this is in Appendix 5, is linked to it, and this one is a 1 mil diameter. So why would the top have to be 1 mil diameter and not 2x? Well, because gravity suggests things will sit on a flat horizontal surface, so basically this is to stop things from going into it. We'll move on down now and we'll just have a quick look at obstacles and placing out of reach, as this was in the particular area as well. So it was mentioned earlier that this is only used where skilled or supervised people work within, so that's what the first bit opens up with. But an obstacle, an example of an obstacle, this is someone preventing someone from touching a live part. This is obstacles, and an obstacle would be, think of a pylon, has a high voltage line hanging off the top of it, suspended across between the pylons, and at the bottom of each pylon you will have either a fence or barbed wire or both to stop you from climbing up. Fairly large things that physically stop someone from touching it. So this is basically what it says here. Obstacles are intended to prevent unintentional contact with live part, but not intentional contact by deliberate circumnavigation of the obstacle. Like I say, if someone wishes to, they could, but they'd probably get injured in the process. Down below you've got placing out of reach, so your pylon again has a bare live wire hanging off the top of it, or multiple wires hanging off the top of it, cables hanging off the top of it, and you shouldn't be able to touch them. So how far does it have to be away? Well, we're only up to 1000 volts on this particular one, so this gives information that you shouldn't be able to touch it, and it should be within arms, not be within arm's reach, which is 2.5 meters. Then it talks about S being the surface, the distance, how far you can actually reach out to something. And over the page you have is a little guide how that can be done. So you've got arm's reach, So 2.5 metres, and if you was reaching out from a platform or reaching underneath a platform, then it's 1.25 metres. And this is your arm's reach guide.